I still remember the smell of cinnamon that morning. It filled the whole kitchen, warm, sweet, just the way my husband used to like it. Christmas was only 3 days away, and I had been planning everything for weeks. The turkey was already thawing in the fridge. The cranberry sauce was half done. I had baked 3 pies, 1 apple, 1 pecan, and 1 chocolate, because my daughter, Emily, loved chocolate pie when she was little. The house smelled like home. The tree stood by the window, lights twinkling softly. The same ornaments we'd used for years hung on it. Some a little chipped, some handmade by Emily when she was just a girl. As I stirred the soup on the stove, I felt a warmth inside me that had nothing to do with the fire. It was the feeling of having something to look forward to. I hadn't seen Emily much that year. She and her husband, Tom, lived about 2 hours away. And with work and life and everything in between, she said they were always so busy. But she had promised this Christmas they'd come. She said, "Mom, we'll spend Christmas with you this year, I promise. We'll bring the gifts and the kids. You don't need to make too much food." But of course I did. That's what mothers do. You can't tell a mother not to cook too much. It's how we show love. So I started early. I cleaned every corner of the house, polished the old silver, even washed the special tablecloth with red embroidery that I only use once a year. By the second day, the counter was full of dishes, roasted vegetables, gravy, stuffing, cookies shaped like stars. I hummed while cooking, the same old carols that played softly from the radio. Silent night, oh holy night, I'll be home for Christmas. That last one always made me tear up. I'll be home for Christmas, if only in my dreams. It felt like the song was written for mothers like me. On the third day, I woke up early, before sunrise. The sky outside was pink and cold. I wrapped a scarf around my shoulders and looked out the window. The yard was covered in a thin layer of snow. Perfect, I thought, a white Christmas. I made hot chocolate and sat by the kitchen table checking my phone every few minutes. Emily usually texted me in the mornings. But that day, nothing. Around 10 a.m., I decided to call her. She picked up after a few rings, her voice a little rushed. "Hey, Mom." "Hi, sweetheart," I said, smiling. "Just wanted to ask what time you'll be leaving so I can keep the food warm." There was a short pause. I could hear something in the background. Maybe the sound of plates, laughter, and voices. "Mom," she said softly. I need to tell you something." My heart stopped for a moment. "What is it, dear?" "Well, plans changed a bit. Tom's parents, they invited us to their place for Christmas dinner. And since it's closer and, the kids wanted to see their cousins, I didn't say anything for a second." The spoon in my hand stopped moving. She went on. "We'll come see you right after the holidays. I promise. Maybe next week? You understand, right, Mom?" For a moment, I couldn't find my voice. I looked around at my kitchen. The pies, the turkey, the decorations, the table already set for 6 people. "Of course," I said finally, trying to keep my voice steady. "Of course, darling. I understand." She sighed in relief. "Thank you, Mom. I knew you'd be okay with it. I love you. Merry Christmas!" "Merry Christmas, sweetheart," I whispered. But she had already hung up. The line went silent. I sat there for a long time, phone still in my hand, listening to nothing. The sound of the clock ticking filled the room. Then I looked down at the counter. 3 days of cooking, 3 days of love sitting there on the table, waiting for no one. For a moment, I thought about crying, but I didn't. I just stood there quietly, my hands still, my eyes on the pie that hadn't even been sliced yet. I whispered softly to myself, "Well, I suppose it's just me then." The day went on slowly. I turned off the oven, covered the dishes, and put most of them in the fridge. The house, which had felt warm and alive, suddenly felt too quiet. Even the lights on the tree seemed dimmer. I sat in the living room for hours, just staring at the fire. Every now and then I'd hear laughter from outside. Neighbors with their families, children playing in the snow. I used to have that too, I thought. Once upon a time, this house was full of laughter. But tonight it was just me. Around evening, I set one plate on the table. Just for myself. I poured a little gravy, took a small piece of turkey, and sat down. The food was good, but it didn't taste like anything. I tried to tell myself that it was okay, that she had her own family now, her own traditions, but somewhere deep inside, it hurt in a way I can't explain. After dinner, I wrapped the leftovers carefully and put them away. I turned off the lights and went to bed early, but sleep didn't come. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of the heater. I thought about Emily's first Christmas as a baby, how her tiny hands reached for the shiny ornaments, how she used to laugh when we sang carols. I thought about all the years that followed, how she'd open her gifts and hug me tight. And now, she had her own children, and I wasn't part of that picture anymore. Still, I told myself maybe next year, things would be different. But even as I whispered it to myself, I wasn't sure if I believed it. The next morning, Christmas Eve, the world outside was white and still. Snow covered the trees like a soft blanket, and the light coming through the window looked pale and quiet. I sat by the table with a cup of coffee, the kind I always made for 2 people. Out of habit, I guess, I poured 1 cup, then looked at the second empty mug, and put it back in the cupboard. I had never spent Christmas alone before. When my husband was alive, we used to wake up early, open presents together, and laugh about the little things. Like how he could never wrap gifts properly. The paper was always crooked, and the tape stuck everywhere. I missed that. But he'd been gone for 8 years now, and Emily had filled that space for me. Every Christmas since she'd come home. Sometimes with her husband, sometimes just her and the kids. It didn't matter how messy things got or how tired I was, as long as they were here. And now, for the first time, they weren't. I looked at the calendar on the wall. December 24th. I thought maybe I should go out. Maybe to church, or to the park, or even just for a walk. But the streets were icy, and the idea of being out there alone made me feel even colder, so I stayed home. I turned on the radio again. The same old Christmas songs. They didn't sound the same anymore. I tried to busy myself. Washed dishes, folded laundry, fixed the ornaments on the tree. But every time I looked around, I saw reminders of what I'd prepared. The gifts I had wrapped for the grandkids sat by the tree, untouched. Each one had their name written carefully on it. To Lily, to Max, with love from Grandma. I smiled sadly. Next week, I whispered to myself. They'll open them next week. I sat down on the couch and turned on the TV, but nothing could fill the silence. I turned it off again and just listened to the sound of the wind outside. Then, around afternoon, I heard a knock at the door. For a moment, my heart leapt. I thought, maybe Emily changed her mind. Maybe they're here. I rushed to the door and opened it. But it wasn't her. It was my neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, holding a small plate of cookies. She was a kind woman, a few years older than me, with white hair always tied neatly in a bun. "Hi there," she said with a smile. "I thought I'd drop by and bring you some cookies. My grandkids made them." "Oh," I said, trying to sound cheerful. "Thank you, that's so sweet." She looked behind me, into the house. "Expecting anyone?" I hesitated, then smiled weakly. "No, not this year. My daughter couldn't make it." Mrs. Jenkins's smile softened. "Oh, honey, you're welcome to come over to our place if you'd like. We're just across the street. It's nothing fancy, but you'd be more than welcome." "That's very kind," I said. "But I'll be fine. I've got food here and a good book." She nodded slowly, understanding. "All right then, but if you change your mind, just knock." After she left, I stood at the door for a long time, looking out at the snow. The world was quiet, and the only sound was the wind brushing against the trees. Evening came faster than I expected. I heated some soup, lit a candle on the table, and sat down again. The candlelight flickered gently, and I found myself whispering a small prayer. Not for gifts or miracles, just for peace in my heart. After dinner, I sat near the fire again. I looked at the old photo on the mantel. Emily as a child, sitting on her father's shoulders, both smiling like the world was theirs. I reached out and touched the frame softly. "She's happy, right?" I whispered to the photo. "That's all that matters." Then, for the first time in a long while, I closed my eyes and let a single tear fall. I didn't cry loudly. It was a quiet kind of sadness, the kind that sits deep in your chest and doesn't need noise. I must have dozed off on the couch, because when I opened my eyes again, it was night. The clock showed 10:15. The room was dim, the fire almost out. I stretched, ready to go to bed, when I heard something. A soft ping. It was my phone. I reached over and picked it up. A message from Emily. It said, "Merry Christmas Eve, Mom. I miss you." I smiled. Then another message came. A picture. It was Emily and her family sitting at a big dinner table, smiling. Her kids had chocolate on their faces. Tom was carving the turkey, and Emily was holding her glass up for a toast. I looked at the picture for a long moment, and then I wrote back, "You all look wonderful. I'm proud of you, sweetheart. Merry Christmas." I put the phone down and leaned back, staring at the photo again. And then, unexpectedly, I started to feel something warm. Not from the fire, but from inside me. Because even though she wasn't here, she was still thinking of me. She hadn't forgotten. Maybe she was growing, maybe her life was changing. But love, real love, doesn't just disappear. It changes shape, and sometimes it visits you in the smallest of ways. Like a photo in the middle of the night, or a simple text that says, "I miss you." I smiled to myself and whispered, "Merry Christmas, my love." Then I stood up, threw another log into the fire, and watched as the flames began to glow brighter again. Christmas morning came quietly. There was no sound of little feet running through the hallway, no smell of hot chocolate, no laughter bouncing off the walls, just the steady tick of the clock and the soft hum of the heater. I got up, wrapped my shawl around my shoulders, and walked toward the kitchen. The table was still set from the night before, and the half-burned candle had melted into a little pool of wax. For a moment, I thought about clearing everything away, but then I decided to leave it, just for a bit longer. Maybe, in a strange way, it made the house feel alive. I poured myself a cup of coffee, added a bit of cream, and sat by the window. Outside, everything looked untouched. The snow from the night before had covered even the old tire tracks, making the world look clean and new. I took a deep breath and whispered, "Merry Christmas," to no one in particular. After breakfast, I turned on the small radio that sat on the kitchen shelf. The same familiar voice from the local station was there, cheerful and bright. "Good morning, everyone. It's Christmas Day, and I hope your homes are filled with love, laughter, and maybe a few too many cookies." I smiled faintly and shook my head. "Not this year," I said softly. Still, I let the music play. Silent Night came on, slow and gentle. It always reminded me of holding Emily in my arms when she was little. How she'd fall asleep against my shoulder as I hummed that very tune. I found myself humming it again, my voice quiet and shaky, but it felt good somehow. After a while, I decided to take a walk. I put on my heavy coat, wrapped a scarf around my neck, and stepped outside. The air was cold enough to sting my cheeks, but it was fresh, honest. The streets were empty, except for a few kids dragging sleds and one man shoveling his driveway. He waved at me, and I waved back. As I walked, I passed the church at the end of the block. The bells were ringing, and I could hear faint singing from inside. I thought about going in, but something held me back. Then, as I turned the corner, I saw Mrs. Jenkins again. She was outside her house trying to shovel snow off her porch steps. "Merry Christmas," she called out. "Merry Christmas," I said, walking up to her. "You're out early." "Well," she laughed. "I'm trying to make room for my son's car. He and the grandkids are coming soon." I smiled politely. "That's lovely." She looked at me kindly, pausing for a moment. "You sure you don't want to join us later? We've got a big roast and too much pie." I hesitated, but something inside me softened. I didn't want to spend the entire day just sitting alone. "Maybe," I said. "Maybe I'll stop by," she grinned. "Good. I'll save you a seat." We talked for a few more minutes, and as I walked back home, I noticed how the snow sparkled like tiny diamonds in the sun. Everything felt quieter, but not sad quiet. More like peaceful quiet. When I got home, I opened the window curtains wide and let the sunlight fill the room. I decided I wouldn't let the day go to waste. I warmed up some food, arranged the gifts neatly under the tree, and even put on my old Christmas sweater, the one Emily had given me years ago, with tiny red snowflakes across it. It felt silly, maybe, but also comforting as the day went on. I tried not to think too much about what I was missing. I tried to focus on what I still had. The warmth of my home, the soft sound of music, and the love that still lingered in small ways. Then, around noon, the doorbell rang. Froze for a second. I wasn't expecting anyone. Maybe Mrs. Jenkins? I walked to the door and opened it. And there they were, Emily, Tom, and the kids. They stood there, bundled up in scarves, snow on their boots, faces red from the cold. "Mom," Emily said, smiling nervously. "Merry Christmas." For a moment, I couldn't speak. I just stared at them, my hands trembling slightly. "Whoa, what are you doing here?" I finally said. We wanted to surprise you," she said softly. "I'm sorry, Mom. I shouldn't have left you alone. I thought it would be easier to split the holiday, but last night, it didn't feel right." The kids rushed forward and hugged me tightly before I could even answer. "Grandma, we missed you," Lily said, her little arms around my waist. Max handed me a small box. "We brought you something." I felt tears rise in my eyes as I hugged them back. "Oh, my darlings," I whispered. "You're the best gift I could ever ask for." Tom stepped forward, looking a bit embarrassed. "I'm sorry too, Mom. We should have thought this through better. You're part of the family. We just wanted to make things easy, but we ended up hurting you." I took a deep breath, looking at each of them. "Thank you," I said softly. "Thank you for coming." Emily looked around the house, her eyes widening when she saw the food, the decorations, the gifts. "You cooked all this?" I nodded. "I thought I'd keep busy." She smiled through watery eyes. "It smells amazing," I laughed gently. "Well, I hope you're hungry." The kids ran to the tree, pointing at the gifts with excitement. I watched them and felt a warmth spread through me, the kind that no fireplace could ever give. Soon we were all sitting at the table, eating, laughing, and sharing stories. The house felt alive again. Emily kept glancing at me as if making sure I was okay. And for the first time in a long while, I truly was. After lunch, she took my hand and said quietly, "Mom, I know things are changing. The kids are growing and life gets busy, but I promise, we'll never leave you out again." I smiled. "I know, sweetheart. Families stumble sometimes. What matters is, we find our way back." She leaned over and hugged me tightly. "I love you, Mom." "I love you too, my girl," I whispered. That night, after they left, I sat by the window again, looking out at the snow. The lights from the houses across the street glowed softly, and for the first time in days, I didn't feel lonely, because even though the day hadn't gone as I had imagined, it turned out better, gentler, warmer, and more real. Christmas wasn't about how perfect the table looked, or who showed up when. It was about love. Messy, imperfect, but still love. I whispered a small prayer of thanks, then turned off the light and went to bed with a quiet smile. And as I drifted to sleep, I thought of one thing. That love, when it's real, always finds its way home. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight spilling across my room. Soft and golden, the kind that makes everything look calm and safe. For a few seconds, I lay there quietly, letting the warmth touch my face. The laughter from the day before still lingered somewhere in my mind, like a song that didn't want to fade. The house smelled faintly of cinnamon and pine. There were still crumbs on the table and half a pie sat in the fridge. For once, I didn't rush to clean up. I wanted to hold on to that feeling of family, of noise, of being seen. I made myself some coffee, poured it into my favorite mug, the one with the faded flowers, and sat near the window. Outside, the snow was melting a little, and the street looked alive again. Children playing, a dog chasing its tail, and somewhere in the distance, the sound of church bells. My heart felt heavy, but not in the same way as before. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was something softer, like peace after a long storm. When the phone rang, I picked it up with a small smile. "Mom?" It was Emily. Her voice sounded bright, lighter than it had in weeks. "Good morning, sweetheart. I just wanted to say thank you for yesterday," she said. "The kids can't stop talking about your pie. And Tom, well, he said your turkey ruined every other turkey he's ever had." I laughed. "That's a good thing, I hope?" "The best," she said, laughing too. Then her voice softened. "Mom, I mean it. I'm really sorry for how I acted. I should have never left you out. I guess I just didn't realize how much these things mean until I saw you sitting there yesterday, smiling like that." I took a slow breath. "Oh, Emily, you're young. Life pulls you in so many directions. You have your family, your home, your worries. I understand. But thank you for coming back. That meant everything." There was a pause. Then she said, "We want to make it up to you. The kids are begging to come stay with you for New Year's Eve. Can we?" I felt tears prick my eyes again, the happy kind this time. "Of course, sweetheart. I'd love that." When I hung up, I sat there for a moment, holding the phone in my hands. I whispered a quiet thank you to the empty room. Then I started tidying up, not out of habit, but with a new kind of energy. I put away the dishes, folded the tablecloth, and carefully packed a few leftover treats for the kids. While cleaning, I found a small piece of paper that had fallen under the table. It was from Lily. A drawing, stick figures of her, Max and me, standing beside a Christmas tree. Above it, she had written in wobbly handwriting, "Grandma's house, S. Love." I held that paper for a long time, my throat tightening. Sometimes, love hides in the smallest things. A drawing, a smile, a late visit after a long day. Later that afternoon, I decided to take a walk. The air was crisp but gentle, and the snow crunched under my boots. I walked past the church, past Mrs. Jenkins' house. She waved from her porch, and then toward the park. There I sat on a bench for a while, watching families play and couples stroll by, their laughter mixing with the winter air. I wasn't jealous, not anymore. I felt full, somehow. When you live long enough, you learn that love changes shape. Sometimes it's a warm hug. Sometimes it's a silent apology. Sometimes it's just someone showing up, even if they come a little late. That's what my daughter did. And that's what mattered. I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the sun on my face. Maybe that's what life is about. Not the moments that go as planned, but the ones that surprise us, heal us when we least expect it. When I got home that evening, I turned on the lights and stood for a while, looking around the room. It wasn't fancy, it wasn't grand, but it was mine, and it was full of love again. I sat in my chair, took one last sip of tea, and whispered softly, "I'm okay," because I truly was. I had my family back. Maybe not perfectly, but real enough. And I had myself, stronger than before. So if you're listening to this, maybe sitting in your own quiet room, wondering why people drift away or why love feels heavy sometimes, just remember this. Even broken bonds can be mended. Even cold hearts can remember warmth. Sometimes it takes distance to realize who truly matters. And if you've ever felt forgotten, please don't lose hope. The people who love you might not always say it right away, but love has a way of finding its way home. It really does. I smiled softly and turned toward the small Christmas tree in the corner. The lights blinked slowly, almost like they were breathing. And I thought to myself, this Christmas didn't go the way I planned. But maybe it went the way it was meant to, because sometimes the quietest moments carry the loudest love. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Not because it's just another video, but because there are so many hearts out there who need to know they aren't alone. So share it for every mother who cooked, waited, and forgave. For every heart that broke but still kept beating with love. Because even in silence, love remembers. And sometimes, love comes back home.